Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Sometimes we talk about some folks as having charisma, and that's usually a good thing. We often mean that the person is engaging, entertaining, warm, and welcoming. A charismatic person nowadays draws people to them. The word charisma comes from the Greek word charis, which means grace. In the Bible, then, charisma means someone who has divine favor or grace. I guess we might consider that we all have charisma because we all have God's divine grace and favor. Certainly, that was true of King David. Over and over, the Bible tells us that David was a man after God's own heart. God seemed to have a love for David that went beyond anything, any wrong that David might do. You might say that David was the apple of God's eye. And maybe the point of this is to let us know that God thinks of all of us that way. What an amazing gift of grace. This week we are looking at an unfamiliar topic for most Lutherans, what we might call a charismatic or a religious ecstatic experience. We're looking at examples in the Bible when it describes such an event happening. And today we want to look a little bit more closely at King David. During the time of King Saul and King David, Israel was often at war with the Philistines. Interestingly enough, the land the Philistines occupied was not too different from where Gaza is today, and war is going on there right now between Israel and the people there. What you need to know is that in those days, before Israel went to war with anyone, they sought to determine if God would give them the battle before they went out to fight. If God said that God would go before them in battle, then victory was assured. Those times they went into battle without consulting God resulted in disaster and defeat. Eventually they got to the point of taking the Ark of the Covenant with them out to the site of the battle to ensure God's presence and favor. In 2 Samuel 6, we have the story of David going out to war with the Philistines. God had said that God would be with them, and David led them to a great victory. Then David and the soldiers returned to Jerusalem, bringing the Ark of the Covenant with them. Early in the chapter, it describes them bringing it out of the house where it was for the journey to Jerusalem. They put it on a new cart, and the Bible tells us David and all the house of Israel were dancing before the Lord with all their might, with songs and lyres and harps and tambourines and castanets and cymbals. That must have been quite a festive parade indeed. Then, when they got to Jerusalem and the crowds were all watching, things got crazy. When those carrying the ark had gone 6 steps, they stopped, and there David sacrificed a bull and a fatling to God to thank God for God's grace and favor. Then another 6 steps and more sacrifices. This was incredibly lavish. Then David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was girded with a linen ephod. No one is sure exactly what an ephod was, but it seems to be a type of apron. The thing was, David was having such an ecstatic experience that as he danced so vigorously that parts best left unseen were visible to everyone. His wife looked out the window and saw all this going on, and later she scolded him. How the king of Israel honored himself today, uncovering himself today before the eyes of his servants, maids, as any vulgar fellow might shamelessly uncover himself. But David replied, "It was before the Lord that I have danced." I think that's David's way of describing the ecstatic, charismatic experience he was having as the ark was brought into Jerusalem. He was caught up in joy and exuberance, celebrating before and with God, and nothing else mattered. That's what happens when you get caught up in God. It doesn't happen often, but every now and then I think I get a similar feeling on Sunday mornings. I don't know if those in the congregation feel it, or feel it when I feel it, or feel it at times I don't. But there are times when the worship just seems to take on a special quality. I'm up front and I realize that we are truly worshiping God, and the cares of the world, the cares of time, how long this is lasting, distractions, none of that matters anymore. We are caught up in worshiping God. It's an amazing time in worship when that happens. Now, when that happens, don't expect me to dance out of my clothes. But it is wonderful to feel so close to God, to be caught up in true worship. It's a gift of charisma. It's a gift of grace. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.